Good morning everyone. Today's topic is modulatory functions of brainstem. So as you all know, brainstem consists of three parts: midbrain, pons and medulla. So in this brainstem we have major centers for vital organs, that is like respiratory center, cardiac center, so which are very important, vital to our human body. So apart from that, we have certain nuclei. Group of cells are called nuclei, so which are for cranial nerves, so that is cranial nerve nuclei, and also some relay nuclei for the ascending and descending pathways, that is from spinal cord to brain and brain to effector organs, that is muscles. So like that we have various nuclei, and apart from that there are some group of cells, specific group of cells which have diffuse system of neurons. So diffuse system of neurons which are arranged in the form of a reticulum or network. So that is called brainstem reticular formation. So brainstem means three parts. So in these three parts, this widely branching diffuse system of neurons is present. So that is called reticular formation. So in today's class we will see some of the how the reticular formation is, where it is, and what are the functions, modulatory functions of its the brainstem. So the learning objectives are introduction of reticular formation and location, nuclei of reticular formation and afferents and efferents, functions and ascending reticular activating system, that is ARAS, and descending reticular activating system, and role of reticular formation in sleep and wakefulness, and role in EEG and learning, and some applied physiology. So as I have already told you in the first slide, reticular formation is a diffuse ill-defined mass of nerve cells. Okay, ill-defined mass of nerve cells and fibers forming an ill-defined meshwork of reticulum in the central portion of brainstem. Brainstem means midbrain, pons and medulla. So ill-defined mass of nerve cells and fibers forming an ill-defined meshwork of reticulum. And coming to its physiological anatomy, it is formed by neurons and processes left over after well-defined name, nuclei and pathways. And this reticular formation is phylogenetically an old system, and it is very poorly defined. We can't exactly tell the borders and exact location. And it is located in the brainstem with poor defined borders, and it comprises of medullary, pontine and midbrain reticular formation. Polysynaptic type of neurons or the synapses are present. It has both ascending and descending components. As we have seen in the objectives, it has ascending reticular activating system and descending reticular activating system. So the extent of reticular formation, so in the brainstem it is situated, right, and it extends downwards into spinal cord and upwards into thalamus and subthalamus. The nuclei, neuronal aggregates or the nuclei in the reticular formation is broadly arranged into three columns: median, medial and lateral. Okay, so the nuclei are arranged in three columns: median, medial and lateral. The median column lies immediately next to the middle line of the brainstem, and the nuclei collectively are called nuclei of Raphe. And this column extends from medulla up to the midbrain in vertical sheets bilaterally. Okay, on both sides of the medial line, these median column are present. So extends from the medulla to the midbrain and present in paramedian zone, serotonergic type of neurons. So it releases serotonin. And medial column, it is situated lateral to the nuclei of median column. Okay, medial is situated lateral to the nuclei of median column, collectively made up of large cells, mainly gigantocellular nucleus, pontine tegmental reticular nucleus, and cuneiform and subcuneiform nuclei. Okay, so these cells will form the medial column. And lateral columns lies lateral to the nuclei of medial column. Okay, so The sequence of columns is first, the immediately beside the central column is median, and beside that lateral to it is medial, and still lateral to it will be lateral column. So these are collectively made up of small cells, mainly parvocellular. Previously in the medial column we have seen that it is made up of gigantocellular cells, and now the lateral column is made up of small cells or parvocellular, which mainly control the visceral functions. It extends from medulla to midbrain. And the functional neuronal aggregates are mainly cardiac center, respiratory center, vasomotor, salivatory, chemoreceptor neurons. Okay, so these centers are concerned with the functioning, heart functioning, lungs functioning. Vasomotor is again related to vessels and heart, and salivatory centers relating to the saliva, that is gastrointestinal system, and chemoreceptors are nothing but the receptors that sense the chemical changes, that is oxygen, H plus and carbon dioxide levels in the blood. Okay, so these centers are present in the reticular formation, and the pathways, that is connections, afferent in different connections of the reticular formations. In efferent we have again descending projection and ascending projection. And if we see the efferents to the reticular formation, so efferents means the nerves which are coming to the brainstem reticular formation. So from where the efferents should come, anywhere from the brain and anywhere from the spinal cord. So first from the spinal cord, mainly by the spino-reticular tract. Okay, so that is the main tract which ends in the reticular formation of brainstem, and also from the collaterals. So as we all know, the ascending tracts like spinothalamic and dorsal column pathways are present. No? So from those tracts, the collaterals will come into the brainstem reticular formation. And apart from that, the efferents will also come from the cranial nerves. Okay, and then tectoreticular, that is tectum, superior and inferior colliculi, which are present in the midbrain. They convey visual and auditory impulses. Okay, so from the tectum also the efferents will be coming to this reticular formation. And some afferents neurons will come from the cerebellum, that is cerebello-reticular, and from basal ganglia directly and indirectly the fibers will be coming to the brainstem reticular formation. And neocortex, that is cortico-reticular fibers from motor sensory cortex and orbital, prefrontal, parietal and temporal lobes, cingulate gyrus and collaterals from the corticofugal fibers. So from all these areas, the fibers will come to the reticular formation of brainstem, and limbic lobe including amygdaloid and hippocampus. So if you see the efferents from the reticular formation, so the fibers which are going out of reticular formation to the brainstem means that is medulla, pons and midbrain, and to the spinal cord, that is downwards to the spinal cord, and also to the cerebrum. So first if we see to the spinal cord, the descending reticulospinal tract. So we have seen this tract in extrapyramidal, if you remember, and this reticulospinal is medial and lateral, two are there. So medial will be inhibitory and lateral will be facilitatory. So these fibers of this tract will connect with the anterior horn cells in the spinal cord, either directly or through interconnecting neurons, internuntial neurons. And they also connect to lateral horn cells, which are the cells of origin of sympathetic nervous system. So after connecting with the anterior horn cells, they will show their effect on the muscle tone. And also to the brainstem, the reticulobulbar fibers connect to the cranial nerve, motor nuclei. So the nuclei are present, cranial nerve nuclei are present in brainstem. No? So for those nuclei, the reticulobulbar fibers will be connected. That is, efferents will go out of reticular formation to those cranial nerve nuclei. And to the cerebellum, some fibers will go, and to the red nucleus, substantia nigra and tectum in the midbrain, and to the thalamus, subthalamus and hypothalamus, and to the corpus striatum, neocortex and limbic lobe indirectly through the thalamus and hypothalamus. So to all these structures, the efferent nerve fibers will go out of reticular. So now we will see the components of reticular activating system. So there are four major components. So first one is ascending reticular activating neurons. From central group of reticular nuclei, that is magnocellular part or gigantocellular part, ascending neurons project into the intralaminar and midline nuclei of thalamus. Okay, so thalamus is a separate class, it will be discussed later. So in this there are various nuclei present. So from the central group of reticular nuclei, ascending neurons will project to the intralaminar and midline nuclei of thalamus. From these non-specific thalamic nuclei, fibers project to all parts of cerebral cortex and limbic system. And few fibers from reticular formation bypass the thalamus and project directly to the cortex. Okay, so from these thalamic nuclei, the fibers will be projecting to all parts of the cerebral cortex and limbic system. And these neuronal projections form the major part of brainstem ascending reticular activating system, which maintains the arousal of being. So it is this ARAS is useful for the or important for the arousal. The person is kept wakeful by the ARAS. Increased activity in these projecting neurons causes excitation of cortical neurons and create alertness and wakeful state. Okay, so this is very important point. It will come as a MCQ. So which component of reticular formation is responsible for alertness and wakeful state of the person, means you have to opt for ascending reticular activating system. And diminished activity in the system will induce the sleep. So it is understood, right? And the next component is monoaminergic and cholinergic fibers. So locus coeruleus is a part which is located in the reticular formation at a junction between pons and medulla. So from this locus coeruleus, noradrenaline, that is NA, norepinephrine secreting neurons will originate. Major monoaminergic and cholinergic systems of brain are located in the reticular activating system. So these fibers are involved in integration of various sensory and behavioral activities. Okay, so these monoaminergic and cholinergic system are involved in integration of sensory and behavioral activities of the person. And next component is fibers from parvocellular part. So fibers from the small cell neurons located in lateral part of brainstem are active only during the awake state and silent during sleep. So this indicates that they control sleep wakefulness cycle. Okay, so the small cell neurons in the lateral part of brainstem will be active only during awake state. And serotonergic neurons originating from the raphe nuclei project to all part of the CNS. Okay, so the nuclei of raphe is the median first group of cells in the brainstem reticular formation. So those will be projecting to all parts of the CNS which are active during sleep. This indicates that these neurons are involved in genesis of sleep. Histaminergic neurons projecting from hypothalamus to all parts of CNS play major role in arousal. Okay, so histaminergic neurons are responsible for arousal and serotonergic neurons are important or responsible for genesis of sleep. So these 2 points are also important MCQs. Serotonin for sleep and histamine for arousal. So remember these 2 points. And next, if we see in detail the ascending reticular activating system, it projects into cerebral cortex in 2 ways. So through subthalamus and then through thalamus. It begins in the lower part of brainstem and extends upwards through the pons, midbrain, thalamus, and finally projects throughout the cerebral cortex. Okay, so from the lower part of brainstem towards the pons, midbrain, thalamus, and throughout the cerebral cortex. So this descending reticular system is divided into 2 subdivisions, namely descending inhibitory and descending facilitatory reticular projections. And now coming to the functions of reticular formation. So this is having a huge list of functions like sleep and wakefulness and alerting responses to emotion and muscular work, and controlling muscle tone, influencing endocrine secretion and role in visceral function, influencing circadian rhythm, influencing EEG and learning, modulates the efferent transmission of impulses, influences the autonomic nervous system. So these all functions are done along with the other major parts of the central nervous system. So not only the reticular formation does all these function, it is not like that. Okay, so reticular formation will be a part of, or it acts along with other organs, other parts of the brain to do these works. So in sleep and wakefulness, the reticular activating system is ascending reticular activating system is a strong drive to keep the person alert. So it is a strong facilitated drive to the central neurons and input through this trigeminal lemniscus and visuo-auditory tracts. And if we see the experimental evidence for this, a section at the upper border of spinal cord separating the entire brain electrical activity of cortex showed a desynchronized pattern indicating that animal is awake. Okay, so if we do the section at upper border of spinal cord, the electrical activity, that is EEG recording, has shown desynchronized pattern which indicates that animal is awake. And if the section is taken above the superior colliculi separating the entire brainstem, electrical activity of the cortex showed synchronized pattern which indicates that animal is in sleep. And extensive lesion of ascending reticular activating system produces sleep, because inhibition of this ARAS will induce sleep. Okay, and how it controls the muscle tone means mainly the descending reticular formation has role in regulating the muscle tone and hence posture and equilibrium. So this is by reticulospinal tract, as I have already discussed in extrapyramidal system. Muscle tone is maintained by facilitatory and inhibitory reticular formation. So these two divisions act through gamma motor neurons and thereby modulate the muscle tone. So facilitatory increases the tone of anti-gravity muscle and inhibitory decreases. So normally there is a balance between the activities of both these group of neurons. So if we see the endocrine control, which is through hypothalamus, in stress conditions the reticular formation will be stimulated, which in turn can activate hypothalamus through the central nervous system. So increased release of CRF, that is corticotropin releasing hormone, which will while acting on the anterior pituitary releases adrenocorticotropic hormone. This increases cortisol secretion. There is also increased secretion of catecholamine and gastric HCl secretion, and stimulates thyroid stimulating hormone secretion through hypothalamus, and it can cause release of gonadotrophins. So all these will be released in case of stress conditions. So that control is also through hypothalamus. And in visceral function like gastric secretion, motility, heart rate, blood pressure, regulation, respiration regulation, salivation, vomiting, all these visceral functions are influenced by various centers located in the reticular formation of medulla. So these centers are vasomotor center, cardiac inhibitory center, respiratory center, vomiting center, salivary nuclei, etc. And these effects are modified mainly through autonomic nervous system. So as this reticular activating system influences the sleep and wakefulness conditions of a person, so it regulates the circadian rhythm of an individual. So this act in EEG and learning, activation of entire cerebral cortex will be present. So EEG pattern obtained in this state is desynchronized and the animal is wakeful, alert, and learning is facilitated. And if we inactivate the reticular formation, it leads to synchronized EEG pattern which will produce sleep and hence animal cannot learn. So if the cerebral cortex and reticular formation is active, So there will be the person is wakeful, alert and learning facilitated. But if it is inactivated, it leads to sleep and synchronized pattern in ECG. So RAS, reticular activating system, can also be activated from cortex, and the most effective parts of cortex being the orbital part of frontal lobe, superior temporal gyrus and the cingulate gyrus. So this may be responsible for alerting responses to emotion and muscular work. So modulation of sensory input or efferents. Impulse modulation. Impulses in the sensory receptor of their transmission can be modulated by reticular form. So we have seen that all the ascending tracts will be giving collaterals to reticular formation. So that's why it has that chance of modulating the sensory input. It has been shown that stimulation of bulbar reticular formation inhibits transmission at the first synapse of ascending sensory tracts. So this brainstem reticular formation inhibits the stimulation of this reticular formation will inhibit the transmission at the first synapse of ascending tracts. So selective attention. It is well known that when one's attention is intensely fixed on one object or task, other sensory impressions are very less effective. Okay, so that is selective attention, which is a main work or main function of the brainstem reticular formation. It ignores. So when we are concentrating fully on our studies or doing some work, doing some office project, so if we are concentrating on one particular thing, so we will ignore some other minute sensations like touch by touch by some some person or some person's call, like that we will ignore many minute or minor sensory informations. So that is called selective attention. Okay, so I hope you understood this selective attention. When you are deeply concentrating in one thing, you will be ignoring, or you will not, your mind will not receive other sensory impressions which are less effective. Okay, neurotransmitters of reticular formation are large cholinergic neurons project to cortex via thalamus, and small adrenergic neurons via intralaminar nuclei of thalamus, and noradrenergic neurons to cerebellum, dopaminergic to basal ganglia, serotonergic project to thalamus, cerebral cortex, hypothalamus and limbic structures. And lastly, applied physiology. Drugs which excite reticular formation are helpful in alerting arousal of the person. So these are sympathomimetic drugs like adrenaline, noradrenaline, amphetamine. Acetylcholine also increases cortical activity, and it increases carbon dioxide and rise of blood pressure also increase the excitability of reticular activating system. Okay, so these drugs will keep the person alert and arousal because they activate the reticular formation. Drugs which inhibit reticular formation are general anesthetics, sedatives, etc. Barbiturates diminish the reticular activating system activity. So RAS means you all keep in mind that ascending reticular activating system. So that's all for today's class. I hope you understood about reticular formation. This is not so important for theory part because 3D questions will not come from this section. So only you expect the multiple choice questions. Okay, so thank you all.